Right, should we make a start, guys? Hello. Right, XC Soar. The next bit is in 3 parts. It's just 2 slides just on some of the key setup points for where you would start for setting up XC Soar, and then I'm going to jump to having XC Soar up here running. I've got a flight being replayed in the background, so we can go through a lot of what's there on XC Soar. I've got a crib sheet for going through a number of points on the live one, and then I'll switch into simulation mode to go through some of the things that I can't demonstrate on the real replay. Right, setup considerations. Now the first thing you probably need to start with is number of pages. Now, but by number of pages, if you've got a screen up there, if you swipe left or right, you can go to another logical page, and you can have up to 7 of those if you really wanted 7. Some people prefer the simplicity of having just one like that. I think the units I push out have got 3 on there. One with the map and a small subset of info boxes. It's always useful to be able to swipe and have the whole map for those situations where you need detailed clarity when you're up against airspace and other problems. And it's always worth having, in my opinion anyway, a 3rd one so you can also show the airspace cross section. If you haven't used it, you really want to look at that, because if you're going through complex bits of airspace, like around London, where actually it's pretty much like this ceiling where you've got blocks and shapes like this, if you're running along the bottom of it, rather than continually inquiring in to say, oh yeah, that bit's at 5, that bit's at 6, it gives you that cross section for the direction you're pointing, and you can just simply see whether you're in and out and whether you're close enough for it to be a problem. Really useful. Page automation. There's some horrible automation in there that's probably more relevant for glider pilots, where you actually want a different screen depending upon whether you're cruising, going in a straight line, whether you're circling, whether you're on a final glide going down to something on the ground. Basically what that means is you can have all your info boxes different for those 3 different modes. Now, I don't know about you, but I struggle remembering where everything is and quickly assimilating that information. Having all those boxes changing for those 3 different scenarios might be quite a lot to follow. I don't know, it depends how your mind thinks. Like mine is fairly simplistic. So one thing to do is really to turn that off. When you set up your pages, instead of having those 3 boxes, 3 modes there, you can use another one which is called auxiliary, and just everything hard coded onto one page, so it does away with that automation. Do dip in and ask if anybody's got any questions. And then
is that part of the profile setup then?
It's in the look. I think if you go into config system and then right at the bottom of the long list, there's a look page, and then you go underneath that, and then there's 4 different areas which go off to about 20 different menus, and there's it's within there. If you remind me, I'll try and fumble my way through it. I don't go in there very often, because once you've got a setup, you don't really need to do it again. You can just replicate and clone. In fact, that's a point I make here. Rather than go into the manual and do this all from scratch, the easiest thing to do is try and find somebody who you think is going to have a sensible view, or you can always email me, and I can give you a configuration file, which is a small file which you can just drop onto your Kobo, and then I can give you a very short manual that matches that. That'll get you started in 3 or 4 minutes. That really is the easiest way of doing it, rather than trying to learn from scratch something that's so big. Then you've got the choice of info boxes. Now there's actually 100 to choose from, and you can have up to 24 on each page. On each page, I mean, I think you've got choices of something like you can have 4, 8, 12, 16 or 24, and you can have them in different positions. There's loads of different configurations. I fly with 2 units, and for last year I started off having 2 separate sets of information, and even having 16 info boxes, it was actually quite hard work, and I've now cut down my 2 units, so they are actually identical. I've just got different pages and different views showing. But a lot to go through, and if you're new to Soar, I mean, you probably need to use it, get familiar with the unit, and then go back to that full 200-page manual, set aside 3 hours and just read through and just look at every one and just step back and say, in the sort of flying I do, is that going to be useful? Because I've seen setups from a lot of people, and it's amazing how all of us are individuals and we've all got different views on the world. I mean, even something simple like north up and track up, we can't agree on, can we? So there's a lot there. Special features, there's quite a few really amazing features. Now, I mean, the triangle planner is probably put in there early on for sailplane pilots, but this is absolutely brilliant for us. And if we're trying to fly a triangle and we're having problems, I mean, to change our plan mid-flight and try and create a proper 28% FAI triangle out of something we've already flown. Who's familiar with the triangle planner, by the way? All right, not very many. Okay, I'll describe what's going on. Now, I'm sure, who's used XC Planner in here? Probably quite a few. Okay, this side here, that's XC Planner, where if you draw your waypoints on there, and as soon as you close them up, what it does is it gives you these 3 axe heads there, and then what you can do is you can drag any waypoint anywhere within that one there, for instance, within that blue axe head, and the triangle still stays within 28%, and you could do that for any one of those to start to formulate a valid 28% triangle. Now here's what you get on Soar. Here's a flight from Milk Hill where we're just in the early stages of the flight and we've gone back as far as Marlborough, and you see what it's doing here. It's very faint, but there's an axe head there, one side, and there's a start of another one there. And what that's doing is at those axe heads, they dynamically move as you fly, and they're showing you the area you've got to go to. So from there, I could possibly go into that bit there, clip the corner of the axe head, come back, and I've flown an FAI triangle that complies with our XC League rules. So a brilliant, efficient tool to help you score the most out of flying when you're doing a sort of free triangle. Another tool, I'm a bit on the fence with this one, with this thermal locator. You can turn it on or off, and I know quite a few people have found this really distracting and don't want it. If you've got it turned on, what happens is when you're going round, as soon as it thinks you're circling, I mean, you can trial it by going round a roundabout. You drive with it in your car, that will come on, and you get that little symbol there. And then if you touch that symbol, it then expands to a big symbol. A lot of people have often said, what's that in front of me? And what it is it's the opposite of what's going on. So you're doing a left-hand sort of counterclockwise circle in a thermal, but it positions you there, and the rest of it spins round, and it's giving you a map of where the thermal strength is. So it takes a bit of a while to work out physically what's going on, and it's made slightly worse by it's about a 1 second lag in all the information being processed, so you've got to think behind by about a second to make sense of it. So if you can do all of that while circling with other people and not crash, it's really good. But I think this is one of these tools where it may have a use if you're up in a overcast sky really struggling and you just want to hang on. I think sometimes there may be a use for it, but I think in the real world of flying together in thermals, which most of us learn to do properly, it may be an automation step too far. Does anybody actually use this here? Quite a few, yeah. What's your experience with it?
Same problem, really learning to deal with the lag.
Yeah.
It puts you off, because I think you have to, once you build it, a bit like slow area, once you build it in, it's not too bad, but
Yeah.
I'm like you on the fence a bit, whether I should be wasting too much time looking at it.
Yeah. It's almost a task in itself to make use of it, so it may be counterproductive, but it's there.
I call it the cow pattern. It's about as useful.
Yeah.
Is there an alternative
an alternative to finding thermals.
It's off there, I think, sorry.
Airspace cross section I've mentioned, and we'll cover that in the demo in a minute. But again, with all of this, quite a few steps to go through just to set up your first basic setup. But so much easier just to drag that config file from a friend that you've seen and you think is going to sort of provide the job. Map orientation. Who uses track up here? Like direction you're... Oh, not many. 3 or 4. And who uses north up? Is that everybody else? Ah, quite popular. And this has been a big discussion point over the years, and early on with the Kobo, I mean, I love having the map track up, so as you're orientating, you're flying towards airspace, you know, you have got that connection with what's going on. But I could never plan properly because the map was always moving around. And it was a eureka moment. That these things cost 60, you know, you can get another Kobo for 60 quid. So why not just fly with 2? So I've got one over here, which I'm using for navigation. That's the track up one that's moving around. Typically got that zoomed in, so you're dealing with the local area, you know, especially when you're sort of navigating around airspace. And over here on the left-hand side, I've got the planning map, which just sits there north up. Because it's like, you know, if you imagine being in the car and picking up your map, you don't sit there and do this with the bloody map, do you? You know, you sit there and you need to stare at it in a position that you're familiar with, because you generally know where things up in one orientation. And that is really effective, having both there. And for years I've been flummoxed why glider pilots often have 2 or 3 devices with them in sailplanes, and all of a sudden it makes sense. So you can do both. You can do your close by touch and feely flying, and at the same time sit back and think ahead to what's going to happen next. So you can deal with both.
It's not an orientation question, but is it possible to have the screens at different zoom levels? Or is it automatically the same zoom when you flip from one screen to another?
Right, oh, sorry, I've what I'm talking about here is 2 physically different Kobos. I've got 2 Kobos there, so that one's nothing to do with the other.
Yeah, but you can't do that on one Kobo.
You can't, no.
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 It's useful to have a bigger scale picture. I know you can zoom in and out, but the screen down, you might go 3 or 4 times.
I must admit I've never done that, but you can only have one orientation.
Yeah.
So if you got track up on one screen,
Switch.
and then you flip to the other one, that's going to be track up and moving as well. So yeah, you can't configure track up and north up differently on screens. Because that was the first thing I tried. That's what I wanted, and then I thought, I can get a workaround. Is that second screen? Yep. Right, I now flip to XC Soar, so I'm just going to break out of here.